Hello, literature lovers. Today I'm going to discuss a very important work that is Lolita. It's a 1955 novel by very famous Russian American novelist Vladimir Nabokov. And the novel is notable for its controversial subject and the protagonist and the unreliable narrator who is a middle-aged literature professor under the pseudonym Humbert is obsessed with a 12-year-old girl, Dolores Hayes, with whom he becomes sexually involved after he becomes her stepfather. Lolita, in his private nickname for Dolores, the novel was originally written in English and first published in Paris 1955 by Olympia Press. Later, it was translated into Russian by Nabokov himself and published in New York City 1967 by Fedra Publishers. So, very popular, very controversial one. It quickly gained a success as a classic status, and it was adapted into films by so many filmmakers. It has also been adapted several times for the stage and has been subject of two operas, two ballets, and an acclaimed by commercially unsuccessful Broadway musical. It's very popular one. Its assimilation into popular culture is such that the name Lolita has been used to imply that a young girl is sexually precocious. So many authors considered it the greatest work of 20th century. It is really great and it has been included in several lists of the best books such as the Times magazine list of the 100 best novels and the Modern Libraries list of the 100 best novels and the Big Read list of novels. It is frequently described as an erotic novel and both by some critics also it is in a standard reference work on literature facts and according to a companion of American short story and the great Soviet Expedia called Lolita an experiment in combining an erotic novel with an instrument novel of manners. So the same description of the novel is found in Desmond Morey's reference book, The Book of Ages, and a survey of books of women's studies courses described it as a tongue-in-cheek erotic novel. Books focusing on the history of erotic literature such as of Michael Parkin's The Secret Record and the modern erotic literature also so classify Lolita. So there are so many references, so many things. More cautious classifications have included a number novel with erotic motives or one of a number of works of classical erotic literature and art and to the novel that contain elements of eroticism such as Ulysses and Lady Chatterley's Lover, and we all know that it was really both were banned in so many countries. This classification has also been disputed. Malcolm Bradley, a famous author, writes at first famous as an erotic novel, Lolita soon won its way as a literary one, and a late modernist dissimulation of the whole crucial methodology. In fact, Samuel Suckman says that Nabokov is a surrealist linked to Gogol, Dostoevsky, and Kafka. Lolita is characterized by irony and sarcasm. It is not an erotic novel. In fact, Lance also writes that the first 13 chapters of the text, culminating with oft-cited scene of Lol unwillingly stretching her legs across Herbert's excited lap are the only chapters suggestive of the erotic. Nabokov himself observes in the novel afterwards that the few readers are misled into assuming this was going to be a Lloyd book, expecting the rising succession of erotic senses. When these stopped, the readers stopped too and felt bored. So there are different styles. The novel is narrated by Herbert, who riddles the narrative with wordplay. So these are some of the things needed to be mentioned, and his very observations of American culture. The novel's flamboyant style is characterized by double entendre and multilingual puns, anagrams, coinages such as nymphad's, a word that has since had a life of its own and can be found in most dictionaries, the lesser used fluent. Most writers see Herbert as an unreliable writer and credit Nabokov's powers as an ironist. There's so much to tell about this work, and it's difficult to summarize it. It's a great work, no doubt about it. For Richard Rorty, in his interpretation of Lolita, in contingency, irony, and solidarity, Herbert is a monster of incuriosity. Nabokov himself describes Herbert as a villain and cruel wretch and a hateful person. Critics have further noted that since the novel is a first person narrated by Herbert, the novel gives a little information about what Lolita is like as a person, that in effect she has been silenced by not being the book's narrator. So this can be a part of the that speech, and the motives are also describing it in all the context related to it, and it is can be read in different contexts and according to different criterias, as psychological both erotic is obviously the first way to be inferred. That is, and Nomi Tamir says writes that not only in Lolita's voice silent, her point of view, the way she sees the situation and feels about it, is mere rarely mentioned and can only be summarized by the reader. Since it is Herbert who tells the story throughout most of the novel, the reader is absorbed in Herbert's feeling, and merely Mika Howe and Sarah Appleton Nagar writes that novel silences and objectifies Lolita. That is the major reason that happens. Christian Clegg notes that this is a recurring theme in criticism of the novel in 1990s. Actor Brian Cox, who played Herbert in 2009 one-man stage monologue based on the novel, stated that novel is not about Lolita as a flesh and blood entity. It's Lolita as a memory. He concluded that a stage monologue could be truer to the book than any film could possibly be. So there are so different point of views to be mentioned here. In fact, Elizabeth Janeway, writing in New York Times Book Review, holds Herbert is every man who is driven by desire, wanting his Lolita so badly that it never occurs to him to consider her as a human being or as anything but the dream fragment made flesh. Clank sees the novel's non-discourse of Loida's feeling as directly linked to the fact that her real name is Dolores and only Howard referred to her as Lolita. Herbert also states he has effectively solipsized Lolita early in the novel. In fact, in 2003, Iranian expatriate Azhar Nafisi published the memoir Reading Lolita in Tehran about a coward women's reading group. In a NPR interview, Nafisi constructs contracts the sorrowful and seductive sides of Dolores, that is, the Lolita's character, and she notes because her name is not Lolita, her real name is Dolores, which, as you know, in Latin means dollar. So, her real name is associated with sorrow and with anguish and with innocence. When Lolita becomes a sort of light headed, seductive, and airy name, the Lolita of our novel is both of these at the same time. And in our culture here today, we only associate it with one aspect of that little girl and crassest interpretation of her. Following Nafisi's comment, the NPR interviewer Madeline Brand lists as embodiments of the later side of Lolita the Long Island Lolita, Britney Spears, and Olsen twins and Seahawks in Stanley Kubrick's Lolita. For Nafisi, the essence of the novel is Herbert's solipsism and his erasure of Lolita's independent identity. She writes Lolita was given to us as Herbert's creature. To reinvent her, Herbert must take from Lolita her own real history and replace it with his own. Yet she does have a past. Despite Herbert's attempts to orphan Lolita by robbing her history, that past is a skill given to us in glimpses. One of the novel's early champions, that is, Lionel Trilling, warned in 1958 of the moral difficulty in interpreting a book with so eloquent and so self devised a narrator. We find ourselves the more shocked when we realize that in the course of reading the novel, we have come virtually to condone the violation it represents. We have been seduced into conniving in the violation because we have permitted our fantasies to accept what we know to be revolting. A minority of critics have accepted Herbert's version of events at face value. So much to tell. I hope you will get the idea. Thanks.